All right, here we go, everyone. Another awesome episode of the All Around Adventure podcast. And I'm excited to welcome Rue McKenrick to the show today, who's the executive director of the American Perimeter Trail. So, Rue, thanks so much for taking time for joining me today. It's really great to have you here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to chatting with you. I actually originally heard about your story from a mutual friend of ours, Buck Huff,
Mhm.
from Alto, Michigan, because I ran into him and his wife, Jenny, during my through hike across Michigan. And they told me that you had made your way there as well. And actually, kind of a funny thing is that my shoes that I've now retired from long distance hiking are are drilled to or are screwed to the side of the outhouse there. I've been walking right alongside next to yours now.
Yeah, they remain very good friends of mine, and it was just wonderful getting to meet them, and so much fun, screwing the shoes to the outhouse, and we we did some hiking, and we had a ball together. So it's a small world.
Yeah, definitely. And I got to hear a little bit about some of your story, as you were doing the American Perimeter Trail, because I know going through Michigan was a little bit later on in that endeavor. So we'll be sure to cover as much ground as we can today, figuratively speaking. So,
Mhm.
but I kind of want to go back to the beginning a little bit here because, of course, every great story has a beginning. So, if you can take us back a little bit here, just what actually was it that inspired you to become a hiker in the first place?
Well, I'm still becoming a hiker.
Mm,
It's a process. It's a becoming. I don't think I've ever become yet. Because I don't know what do you consider a hiker when you're hiking or when you finish your first long trail or the Triple Crown. I mean, it's still a process for me. So I haven't become a hiker. I'm becoming one all the time, every day. I had so many inspirations because, I mean, just nature in general. The hermit thrush, the sound of the hermit thrush was something that brought me into the woods, believe it or not. And I lived right off of the Appalachian Trail. My parents did. And so I saw long distance backpackers every summer, and I would give them rides when I started driving. And my parents aren't backpackers, but they would give them rides to and from the post office and such. And so I met long distance backpackers, like I said, every summer. I remember two ladies in particular at the store, and I probably asked them the same question you just asked me. And I remember them saying to me, well, we play in the woods every day. And that was it. I was like, sign me up. I'm in. So,
yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate that answer because it is kind of like one of those things where, you hear about hikers who complete amazing hikes. But then I think the question kind of remains at the end of that, though, is okay, so what now? Like, what's next? I mean, it's like, yes, I did this trail, but there's different trails out there that are covering different types of environments, different landscapes, different people, different towns, and the list goes on. So I guess it's just like that is an interesting point. It's just like, yeah, I mean, are you fully a hiker? Like, what does that mean exactly? Does that mean like you went out and did one for a day? You walked across, like, you walked down your block? I mean, yeah, there's a lot of ways you can look at that for sure.
mhm.
All right. Well, but I mean, even so, going back though, what have been some of your like early hiking memories? Just like, I guess, say when you got started. I know, as you mentioned, that you're still kind of on this evolution in your journey as a hiker. But what are some of the early trails and places that you got to go out to and hike?
I mean, I remember as a teenager, right off the Appalachian Trail by the Delaware River Gap. I remember seeing my first bear. So that was pretty memorable. Um, I remember backpacking in Georgia. This was probably 20 some years ago, and just north of Springer Mountain, which is the terminus of the Appalachian Trail, the southern terminus. And I can remember sitting to take a break and I wasn't very far from Springer, and a gentleman came around the corner and he was crying. And he didn't realize I was there, and he saw me and he like quickly tried to, like wipe the tears off his face. And I wanted to tell him like it's okay. I didn't know why he was crying. And I said, "Hey, how you doing?" He said, "I'm not having such a good day." I said, "Why is that?" He said, I'm attempting to through hike the Appalachian Trail. And I just left my wife and little child back at the road, back at Springer Mountain. And I said, "Oh my." And honestly, I just wanted to tell him, like, just go back. Like maybe they're still there. Just go back, just go back while you can. And so I remember that being just like a very powerful moment. I never found out what happened to that gentleman, but I think it was probably a year later. I was leaving Springer Mountain, the same place, and I was coming around that same turn with tears running down my face as well, of gratitude for attempting a through hike, but also like I was leaving a loved one at that point in time for 5 or 6 months, and so I felt that pain as well, and it was very bittersweet. Starting a trail can be exciting, which can feel like anxiety, and it also can have this bittersweetness to it of being in love with what you're doing, but then also having like grief, like a sense of loss as well. So.
Yeah, I did notice that too when I started my through hike across Michigan. I did the North Country Trail, started on the Wisconsin-Michigan state line, and my younger brother, who's one of my best friends in the world, dropped me off. And, it was the same thing. I'm like, I'm excited for the journey ahead, but, it's just, I saw my brother and my sister-in-law drive away, and I knew it was probably going to be months before I got a chance to see them again, so I definitely know what you mean. So kind of like growing up alongside like the Appalachian Trail, is that like the first trail that you hiked when you set out to for the Triple Crown?
Um, well, I think I'll clarify something there. I never set out to hike the Triple Crown.
Oh,
I think that honestly, that's probably more of a contemporary notion, because 22 years ago, I don't remember anyone speaking about hiking the Triple Crown. I don't think it was really a thing at that point in time. Like, you hiked a trail, and if you had a good experience, you looked for another trail to hike. And if you had a good experience with that, you looked for another one to hike. And then I don't think it was really something, it was never on my radar. Definitely not the first couple of years of backpacking. But I completed the Appalachian Trail, but I would say most of the hikers on the Appalachian Trail at that time had never heard of the Pacific Crest Trail, had never even heard of the Continental Divide Trail or the Triple Crown. There was no social media.
right.
We weren't doing podcasts and stuff. So I never considered hiking the Pacific Crest Trail until, I don't know. I don't know when I thought about that. It was months after I got done with the Appalachian Trail. And I think maybe even my hiking, I didn't have a hiking partner on the Appalachian Trail, but on the Pacific Crest Trail, I did. And I think they probably motivated, they were really into it. And I was like, oh yeah. And I definitely had no intention of hiking the Continental Divide Trail. I can remember being in Northern California, and another backpacking friend picked me up at a trailhead, and he was like, "Oh, now you'll have to hike the Continental Divide Trail, and then you'll be a backpacking god," And I just laughed it off. I had no intentions of doing that at all. So I just thought it was kind of a joke. I didn't think about it until, like a year after that. I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to go hike the Continental Divide Trail. And it just, I didn't really think, I don't think it was, I don't remember a Triple Crown like really being celebrated, or, I've never gone to Alda to like get my plaque or give a speech or anything like that. And so for me, it was really just something that happened. It's something that like more happened to me than me making it happen.
Yeah, I guess that is an interesting question because yeah, the Triple Crown, that's a term that I've seen like come up multiple times as I've, been getting into hiking myself. But yeah, is there like I don't know, like a registry or a database that where people can actually like register, say that they've done it, or is that just something that you just unofficially say that you've done once you've completed it?
No, Alda is the holder of the Triple Crown.
Mm,
They're a long distance hiking organization, and so they have what are called gatherings, and they recognize Triple Crowners there. So if you contact them, and I don't know what information they need, and then you can apply for that status, and then I think they give you a plaque, and you give a speech in front of the people that are at the conference, at the gathering, and you're recognized in that way. But what I'm saying is, I've noticed in the last couple of years, like people claim the Triple Crown before they've backpacked. So they're like, I'm going to go hike the Triple Crown.
mm-hmm.
That's a new thing. That's a very new thing. I don't think anyone back in the day ever said they were going to hike the Triple Crown. I don't. Things changed. So yeah,
Right.
I don't remember. As you talk to other guests, maybe that have been backpacking for 20 years or something, ask them, and I think they're going to tell you the same thing, that it just wasn't a thing where you set out to hike the Triple Crown. And also, I don't remember people being able, like, I don't remember people doing them like one, two, three, like one, in years, one, two, three, because I mean, I certainly didn't. I had to save up money, and I did hikes those summers, but not long hikes in between. So I had to take a summer off in between each, or a year off. Not completely. I mean, I still did other trails, long trails during those summers, but I had to take time off from backpacking during the like winter season to either do like work at an environmental ed center or do ski instruction or backpacking guiding or something like that. Worked a lot, just would work, no days off around the clock, to just try to save up enough money to get back out onto another long trail. And then by the time I was finished with the trail, I would be out of money. So then I would have to start the process all over again. And I did that. I did that for many, many, many years. Uh, yeah, all of my 20s and most of my 30s. So
Gotcha. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
you brought up the point saying that when you were kind of setting out on these long distance trails, like this predates the internet. Well, maybe not the internet, but like
Mhm.
social media and like all of these resources that are kind of at like the disposal of long distance hikers today. So, what did kind of like planning and logistics look like for you to get out on these trails like early on? Because again, maybe if there weren't like a lot of websites to go to right away, or maybe a lot of like, maybe I would say documented maps perhaps too, what did that look like as
Mhm.
far as planning and before you getting out on the trail?
Okay, so I hiked the Triple Crown without a phone. So that's one thing.
Mm.
There weren't smartphones because I finished 15 years ago, I guess, the
Mm-hmm.
Triple Crown. Um, and so that wasn't, there wasn't social media. Like what I did, this is what I did. It was experiential for me. So I got myself out on the Appalachian Trail and like the surrounding trails. This would have been like in Pennsylvania area and also the Southeast as well. Not as much New England at that time. And I read, I read a lot. So um, I read Colin Fletcher. He wrote backpacking guides from the 70s. And so I read, whatever I could of his. Um, I read Ray Jardine, who wrote a book called Beyond Backpacking, and it really was a foundation for me because when I hiked the Appalachian Trail, I used some homemade gear, and then on some of the other trails, including the Pacific Crest Trail, I used all homemade gear. So that would be my sleeping bags, my backpacks, my tent, my clothes, my stove, like pretty much everything except for my shoes.
Hmm.
So these were huge influences on me. And then you would read stuff like romantic stuff, like Henry David Thoreau or Emerson. That doesn't really, I mean, Thoreau did climb Mount Katahdin. He ended up on the wrong summit, but you know, it didn't ever necessarily have to be completely attributed to backpacking, but maybe something around nature or conservation, like Aldo Leopold. So I was reading a lot of different information. You know, I took what I liked and I left what I didn't like. Ultralight backpacking didn't exist, or I'm sorry, it was just coming in. It was
Hmm.
just starting to happen. And Ray Jardine was the one of the people who kind of brought that into everyone's consciousness. And but before that, if you were a light backpacker, you were more of a minimalist.
Right.
And so I hear people refer to themselves as a minimalist right now, but um, ultralight means that you're carrying all the gear that you need, but it's just super lightweight stuff. And then a minimalist is a little bit different because a minimalist means that you're carrying not everything maybe that you need, but you know how to get by with what you have.
Right.
And so that requires like a lot of backcountry skills. So knowing how to rig and know how to tie knots, and and there's an experiential piece there as well. So,
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Because I feel kind of spoiled because when I through hiked across Michigan, I had the Avenza app on my phone. And even if I had my phone in airplane mode, I could still track my location on the map as I went. So even though I printed off like all the maps for each of the different areas and chapters along the North Country Trail in Michigan. I think I relied. I think I might have overly relied on Avenza, but as we know, electronics don't hold up maybe quite as well as just good old fashioned analog, like fold out
Yeah.
maps and paper maps and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, I have access to Gaia GPS provides service for me, technical support, and also like navigational support. Um, and they're an app, but really for the APT, I mainly use Map and Compass. So I just got maps from wherever I could because that's just what I'm used to doing. That's
Gotcha.
how I'd hiked the other trails. The Appalachian Trail, I didn't feel like the maps were that important unless there was an emergency. Uh, but definitely the Pacific Crest Trail, like navigating through snow for a couple hundred miles without a trail. Um, and then the Continental Divide Trail, yeah, you had to know how to use a map and compass, or you had to be with someone who knew how to. And then you better take care of that person because if they get hurt or something, you're in trouble. So you got to keep that person happy. But that was kind of the process that I used on the APT as well. A lot of map and compass work, and I'm I feel grateful to have gotten to develop those skills, a lot of backcountry skills earlier in my life, and then I've had all these years to try different things out. So I'm probably stuck in my ways a little bit, to be honest with you.
Well, I think there's something to be said there, and I think it's an empowering feeling knowing that you could get by and get from one place to the next using skills like that. I can recall one time, this was a few years ago, I was in Scotland, and myself and a friend of mine, we did a 5-day overland trek from the small town called Dalwhinnie to Fort William, which is where Ben Nevis is. And we navigated the whole way utilizing map and compass. And thankfully for him, I was glad to have him along because he also knew how to read a topo map and, use a compass. And so that's what we did, just good old fashioned looking at the land, looking what kind of features match what we see on the map, and then using the compass to, kind of get headings and things like that. So I think that was a little bit more of a pretty fulfilling trip because we had to utilize the skills and knowing that what we had at our disposal, knowledge wise, that is, got us to where we needed to go. So I think there is something to be said there with utilizing skills like that.
And I couldn't have hiked through the pandemic without having those skills anyways, because I wasn't going into towns, so I wasn't charging my electronic devices. So I didn't have contact in that way for several months during the summer of 2020. And if I didn't know how to, so actually in one of my mail drops, I didn't catch it until I was a couple days into like a long wilderness section that I had the wrong maps. I had the first couple right maps, but I either had the wrong maps or I was missing a couple. So I actually had to draw. I drew my own maps and like elevation profiles just from looking around. And I got to a high point where I had a view, and then I just drew my maps as best as I could, and then I just did as best as I could because I was off trail. So, it's kind of like not a lot of people I think have the stomach for getting lost either. I don't either. I've gotten lost plenty of times. Like I've lost myself before on the map or had the wrong map. That wasn't the only time. I got the wrong maps one other time and didn't realize it until I was already into the section and had to do a bunch of guessing. But being lost like that can be really, really nerve-wracking. You just have like this, can't stop thinking about it. And so I guess I've become more comfortable with being lost. But I know, my one friend, Nimble Oil Nomad, when I hiked the CDT and we were joking the other day, he was like, yeah, on the CDT, I like got lost and I ended up, way far away from the trail, 20 miles away over in this other place. And I was like, I did the same thing at that spot like years ago. So, that was years ago for him and it was years ago for me. It was in the Rockies and both of us had taken just headed. I remember what it is now, but both of us have kind of like went out the wrong ridgeline and followed it. And so you would just be like feeling kind of screwed for days. Like I am so screwed.
Yeah.
And then you would just do the best you could with it. And it always worked out. So.
Yeah. Well, and it always makes like, a fun story to tell because I think when we tell these stories from our time on the trail, I think people are often most curious about not everything that went right, but like what went wrong, like those misadventures, I think always kind of make like those fun stories to reflect on, even though they may not be fun in the moment, but in hindsight, they can be kind of funny.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, so you mentioned that you brought up, the APT, as I've introduced at the beginning, it's the American Perimeter Trail. And now this was, a pretty long, endeavor. And I guess I'm just really, am curious, and I'm sure you've probably been asked this many times over, but I guess where did this idea come from to establish, a trail as long as this? Cause it's like 14,000 miles long. I mean, what brought this idea on?
It was a thought. I'd already completed the Triple Crown, and that wasn't necessarily like the highlight of all my backpacking. I've hiked a lot of other trails as well, and it's been a varied experience. But let's just say I had some backpacking miles under my belt, and I remember exactly where I was when it happened. I was at a ski resort, and it just hit me all at once. It was just a normal day. It's just a normal day at the ski hill. And, it just came into my mind. I saw it, I like could see it in my vision. And there was two pieces that came to it. It was like, I saw like almost the map, just like in print on my consciousness. And then there was another piece that came with it that said like, no, but you'll have to build this. This will be for others. I knew right away that I would never backpack this if it was a matter of simply for my own satisfaction,
Mm.
or if it was primarily to get acknowledgement. Because at the end of the Triple Crown, I finished Mexico. And so I remember being in New Mexico one day, and I'm walking and I just started thinking to myself, like, what am I doing out here? Why? What am I doing? I've been backpacking solid for a couple of years now, several years at this point, I guess.
Right.
And why? You know, asking some of these bigger questions. And I couldn't really come up with a good reason besides just like, I'm young, have fun. And that's good enough. That is good enough. Oh, and I love the outdoors and I love travel and I love meeting people. That's plenty. But as time went on for me, it wasn't enough. And it's not that I wanted more, I just wanted more purpose. I just wanted to be hiking with more purpose. And so when the thought of the American Perimeter Trail came to my mind, it was coupled with the idea that you will start a nonprofit and we will build this 14,000-mile trail around the country. It'll be connecting communities and people everywhere. We're going to bring people together around something that's positive, because we often come together over things that are very negative,
Right.
which isn't bad, but something horrible happens, a hurricane, 9/11, things like this that are extremely negative, and we come together. Thank God we do. But here was something that we could come together that was very positive. So the messaging for me all came together. So I knew that I would never attempt to hike it unless it was purposeful and meaningful and something bigger than myself,
Right.
I would say. And then I pretty much put it on the shelf for 10 years. I would think about it every once in a while. I would have these moments. It would be like every 6 months where I'd be like, okay, back to the dream. And then I would like work, like, I don't know, start sending emails or like getting some information for like 2 or 3 days, and then life would catch up with me. And then when it would be back to life. And then 6 months later, maybe just pop back up again. And 10 years into that, I made a decision. I was riding my bike. I've walked and bike commuted exclusively. I don't own a car, so I've walked and bike exclusively for the last 12 years. And I do that during the winter as well. So I'm usually on a fat tire bike or a studded tire bike. And I was riding my bike and I hit an ice patch and I went down and I broke my helmet and ended up in the hospital with a TBI. And the next day I pretty much decided to resign from my work, and I was going to be heading out on this was wintertime, and I'm going to be heading out on the APT and creating the American Perimeter Trail this summer. Here we go. That was in 2019. So that is how it came together for me.
Yeah, it's I really like this idea of, kind of being purpose driven. And I guess in this case, being in a way, being of service to others, because, like you said, you're creating this trail to foster community and togetherness. And that was one of the things that got me out on my through hike, because I was raising money to for a nonprofit to help veterans. Because I don't know if I mentioned when you and I were connecting, but I'm a former Marine, and so I wanted to do something for veterans. Yeah. But I think
and thank you for your service, Josh. I appreciate that.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. And but I think for me, that was like one of the things that kind of kept me going, because, let's face it, it's not everything's going to go right when we're out doing these long distance hikes. A lot of things are going to go wrong. And, those situations are going to just make us think, all right, well, enough of this. I'm going home. Forget this. But I think, having that driving factor, I think is kind of sort of what keeps us going. So kind of when you were out there, like on the trail, like when you had like those moments, those challenges and those misadventures, and I'm hoping I can ask you to maybe share a couple of them,
Mhm.
just,
Mhm.
for context, but
Mhm.
what was it that you were kind of telling yourself to keep yourself moving despite those things?
Well, I mean, there's the people component, but we're not a recreation. So the American Perimeter Trail Conference is a 501(c)(3) nonprofit
Mm-hmm.
that I created while I was backpacking. I didn't do that before I left, and I was trying to get I needed support and help and money. So I started hiking, hoping to be able to do that, and was able to. And we are not a recreation organization; we're a conservation organization.
Okay.
So uh, we feel like what's good for the land is good for the people, and we feel like what's good for the people is good for the land, and what's good for the animals is good for the people as well. So I'm not necessarily an environmentalist. I'm a conservationist, which means that I look more into we have these resources and how can they be utilized in a responsible way. And so for us, we're creating this conservation corridor around the United States, and the way in which it's to be used is by humans is for recreation. So that is the way that we go about that. But I had my mantra on the trail, you know, I had people rooting me on. That helps, but sometimes that doesn't even have a place to land, if you're going through a rough time.
Right.
And I just always had the mantra, there's always a way through. I'm doing that right now because I'm going through a tough time right now.
Right.
And that's what I say to myself. There's always a way through. There's always a way through. And if I listened to any naysayers during any of this, I would have never started.
Mm-hmm.
I would have never started. I mean, I had I just had to kind of block that all out, almost like to the point of living in denial. Where people are like, you can't do this, or you shouldn't do this, or so I just every time I come up against something, there's always a way through, and so far, I've always found a way through.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those things where, doing a long distance hike, regardless of how long you are setting it out to be, really the laws of physics is that as long as you keep moving forward, eventually you will make it to your destination. There is an end point and you will reach it just so long as you keep moving forward. And that's actually the thing that I say at the end of every single episode for the All Around Adventure podcast is always move forward, because just to
Mm.
kind of going along with that. And I think that fits so well. So if I may ask you then, what have been some of the challenges in misadventures, like or sticky situations, or as I like
Mm.
to say in the we say in the Marine Corps, spicy situations
Okay.
that you've been in out there?
Everything happened. Everything has happened on the APT. Uh, I didn't get divorced. I didn't get married. I'm not married. I didn't have any kids. I don't have any kids. No one got pregnant. There's some things that didn't happen, but everything else pretty much happened. And I didn't get off to the best start, really. When I started, I had all used gear, and I guess if you added up the years, it was much older than me. If you added up the age of my gear, it was like 125 years.
Oh wow.
And I had $400 in my pocket to go the whole way around the United States. And my hiking partner that was supposed to be with me for at least like the first couple sections, and I was going to, like, he was one of my best friends, try to convince him to go as far as possible. He died. And so
Oh man.
I left. I didn't even make it to his celebration of life because it happened so soon to the leaving date. Um, and I lost 8 friends during this trek. I don't know why. I have had very little loss in my life, And I don't know why everyone started dying when I started. And I'm not being cavalier here. I've been through this and had to talk about it now. And so, um, and I'm not going to mention names, but I came back. Had so much gratitude. I came back to Bend during my hike for a little bit to spend the last couple of weeks with one of my best friends in hospice until she passed, and my brother was killed while I was out there. Um, and I started with stitches in my mouth. I couldn't chew. I couldn't chew. So I was boiling all my food for the first week or two and just drinking it. Like it was pretty gross.
Wow.
Like this sounds nasty, but it was something that I could manage. Like, I don't know, boiling like tuna and other stuff wasn't working, but like fig Newton soup, which is like super gross in the front country, but if you're hungry in the back country, that was okay.
Right.
So I did that. Right off the bat, like I had a foot issue and I had to sew like in between my toes back together. I had to stitch myself. So I got off to like kind of a rough start. There was a giardia in there for a couple weeks. I got detained by law enforcement over 20 times. I ended up with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth for most of the trek, unfortunately. There was something that wasn't going on before I started, and that was a pandemic. I got like a broken toe and rib from a tree falling on me. And
wait, what?
Yeah, that happened in
Dang.
Ohio. Yeah, that happened in Ohio before I met Buck. Uh, so that happened in my sleep. It knocked me out. It knocked me clean out. I came to like 16 hours later. Didn't have a clue what had happened. I was in a hammock too.
Wait, okay. So you're sleeping in a hammock and a tree fell down right on top of you as you were sleeping?
Yeah, it was kind of up this hill, and there was a bad storm that night, and it just came. It was up the hill, and it just fell down and somehow made it down the hill right on top of me. And it rang my bell. It knocked me clean out. And when I woke up, I had no idea what was going on. Like, because I couldn't see anything because my hammock's like in my face.
Mm-hmm.
So I just have this fabric, I have this nylon in my face, and there's like pain in my body, and there's a lot of pressure on my body. And I had no idea what had happened because like I said, it knocked me clean out. I didn't wake up until like maybe 2 or 3 the next afternoon, I think. And when I came to, and then I pulled myself out of the hammock, I started to realize what had happened. And, I packed my stuff up. I was in a lot of pain. And so then I just I like bushwhacked my way out to get to the front country to get like a room and get some medical attention. And that wasn't the first time that it happened.
Okay.
The other time it happened was like 20 years ago. The day before I finished the Appalachian Trail, I had a tree fall on me in my hammock as well there. So there was the second time that it had happened.
I think the message there, Rue, is that you should probably just get a regular tent.
Yeah, I trade out shelters. So the APT, I probably have gone through. I'm not sure. I haven't counted. Maybe 7 shelters, maybe 10. I don't know. Maybe 7 or 10 backpacks. Everything goes about 2,000 miles for the most part.
Gotcha.
And then I swap them out. So, yeah, just dealing with. Yeah, there was a lot. Everything happened. I got shot at. I got all of my gear stolen.
And was that okay? So were you the hiker that I think someone else told me that you got your gear stolen? Was it up in Kalkaska that happened in Kalkaska, Michigan? Were you that guy?
I'm that guy.
Okay, right, yeah.
I'm that guy.
Wait, was that the first time that happened to you on the APT? Was like your gear getting stolen? That is.
I had that happen to friends on other trails. Like like I had two friends where they got a ride. The two of them got a ride, and the they were like, "Oh, do you need to stop here at the store?" And they're like, it was just a convenience store, not the main store. And they're like, "Oh, we'll just run in and grab a drink or something real quick." And they ran in, and the people left
Oh,
with their stuff in the
geez.
car. So, I mean, it does happen. I get really bad separation anxiety if I don't have my pack in my vision at all times.
Hmm.
And this was like one of the only times, go figure, right? Like the one time. And really what happened is I went into a store, um, and you can sometimes drop your pack. Like sometimes they'll ask you to drop your pack somewhere and you can drop it in the store or you can drop it outside because of like the glass doors and stuff, you can still see it. And I was in the store. I was just going to grab a Gatorade and run right back out. And I got I got in the store and nature called.
Mm.
And so I'm like I'm actually in the bathroom going like, "Oh man, I can't believe I left my pack out there. That was really stupid." And I was like, "Oh, stop. You're being ridiculous." And sure enough, I walk out the front door and it's not there. And they didn't have cameras. So
Oh.
I made a report. Half of my stuff came back to me months
Oh,
later.
really?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Huh.
So and I have Remington, the hound dog, to thank for that. There were some people who were, I guess they were following along with the adventure. I had never met them, and uh, they were just. I think they live in Michigan, and they were just driving back home, and they stopped in Kalkaska to let the dog out to, for a potty break.
Hmm.
And he went running down like this trail. So they were at the same like store. And I guess there was like a little 2-track that went over to like a apartment complex or something. And he went running down there and was back in the woods and he was back in these brush, like going at it with something. And his owner like kept yelling at him, like, "Hey, like, come on, come on." And he like wouldn't leave it. So the owner went back there to see what was going on, and it was my stuff. And so just half of it was there. So like the cash was gone. Um, oh, geez, the shelter was gone. Um, I think I don't remember exactly what was missing, but it was basically like half of my stuff was gone. It wasn't. They didn't know what they were doing because I think the sleeping bag that was in there was probably the most expensive thing that I
Mm.
had, and they left. They left that, but so then they see this stuff, and this is like I said, a month or two later, and it just flagged in their memory. Hey, we remember, like, Rue came through here and he had his stuff stolen. Maybe this is his stuff, and they could go online and look at pictures and tell like if that was my backpack or not. So I guess they just grabbed whatever they wanted and then ditched it, just threw the rest in the woods to like get rid of the evidence. And so then they dried all my stuff out. It was soaked, it had been outside, and they mailed it back to um, my front country coordinator who lives in Philadelphia, Layla Grace, who is also VP of the APTC. And so we got some of it back.
Gotcha. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I remember I heard this story from someone in the Upper Peninsula before I crossed the bridge. And I remember like Kalkaska stood out in my mind when I got there, and I was and I remember myself, okay, yeah, pack stays with me at all time, and like, yeah, I remember I went to like the grocery store, I go in there with my big pack, and of course I'm getting all these weird looks because I got this big backpack on my back as I'm going in there looking for stuff. And then I buy like maybe just like a couple sandwiches or something like that, and I sit on the bench outside, and I got my pack like sitting right on the bench next to me because that story stood out in my mind when I
Oh
was going
no.
through Kalkaska. So I mean,
Oh, I got
sorry, I
I
had to
got
learn from your situation there.
I got such a response from that, from people from Michigan and from Kalkaska saying that's not who we are. And I said,
Mm,
I know you aren't, because you know what? The people in Michigan treated me wonderful. And it was actually a moment where they had opened everything back up from the pandemic. Now they would close everything down again,
hmm.
but they had opened everything up. So people were just wonderful to me in Michigan. And, I can remember like, uh, Lori, who has the hiking podcast, is from Michigan, and let me know, that's not who we are. And Anish, Heather Anderson contacted me and said, I'm from Michigan and that's not who we are. And it's not. But the thing with being like a recreational backpacker, you could make whatever decision you wanted to make during the pandemic and then take whatever consequences that came with that. But being a professional backpacker, I rely on sponsors and contributions.
Right.
So when the pandemic came, I wasn't, I made up a methodology for which I called a backpacker's approach to isolation, to social isolation. And then I followed that methodology through the pandemic, which kept me extremely isolated during that time. But otherwise, my trip would have been over because I did lose some sponsors. I had one break a contract as soon as the pandemic started. I had another one go out of business. And if I was approaching the Appalachian Trail at that point, and I never stepped foot on the Appalachian Trail. I made my own route up through the Appalachians. If I would have stepped on the Appalachian Trail, that would have been the end of my trip anyways, because my sponsors, because the Appalachian Trail Conservancy was asking long distance backpackers to go home, and my sponsors and my contributors would have dropped me. So that would have been the end of the trek one way or the other. So I had to do things a lot differently than maybe I would have otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah. So you brought up some of the highlights from the ATP. You were talking about some of the people that you met in Michigan that were, very good, especially those who were very supportive, like following what had happened in Kalkaska and everything. So I guess, and this is going to be a loaded question because, again, the ATP is 14,000 miles long, but what have been some of your major highlights? I mean, you mentioned some of the people, but maybe is there a continuation of just people in other areas that really stood out in your mind, or maybe just a specific natural spot that really stood out to you? What kind of comes to mind as far as highlights is concerned from the APT?
Oh, yes. Certainly. Well, so in Michigan, just so you know, those people floated me for a while. And I don't want to say those people. It's a lot of people from the North Country Trail community.
Yeah.
Helped me along because I didn't have any gear. So, and then, I contacted the sponsors and said, like, we got to replace all of this. But that was going to take, like, they had to get that stuff in the mail. And, I couldn't get a hold of everyone right away. And so they started, like, just shuttling me up through Michigan, like passing me off. So like I would borrow some of their gear, or they would day hike me and then pick me up and take me back to their house and then drop me back off there. And then I would hike on and someone else would grab me. It like became this whole kind of network thing. A member, Carla with a K from North Country Trail community, started contacting everyone saying, hey, this guy needs some help. And not only has he lost his gear, but he's been alone for a year. He hasn't seen another backpacker in a whole year. So you probably would like to spend some time around people. And, there's been the pandemic. So that was definitely like a highlight, the care that I received. But there was, so highlights, I mean, there's the most beautiful backpacking you can find in this country, anywhere in the world. The High Sierra of California, the North Cascades of Oregon and Washington, or the Wind River Range of Wyoming, or the Rockies of Glacier and Montana, or the 14,000 foot mountains in Colorado, or the plateaus in New Mexico, or southern Louisiana and southern Mississippi and southern Alabama and northern Alabama. And there's so many finishing the Appalachian Trail on top of Mount Katahdin. And there's been so many wonderful places that I've gotten to over the years. But really it's more cumulative than that, in the sense that it's 1,000 small things that happen collectively. And that can just be like the tenderness of like a baby's hand, or a smile or a ride from a stranger. Um, and I always say, like, I backpack because of the people, the places, and the open spaces, and that's what I'm there for. The nature, and so there's the highlights. Like I said, it's more of a collective of many small things, because the the highlight is just determined by the experience. It could be the ugliest section of trail, but be your favorite because maybe something happened there.
Right.
Maybe you met the person you're gonna marry. Who knows? Who knows what happened?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you never know. But yeah, I share the same sentiment when we talk about the people, like then especially along the North Country Trail community in Michigan. You know, you just brought up the point about how maybe some places weren't that great, but there was an experience tied to them that made them good. The southern part of Michigan along the North Country Trail doesn't follow a lot of like forests, a lot of road walk and things like that, which personally for me were my least favorite part. But that's when I definitely saw a lot of kindness from trail angels along the way. That's of course when I met Buck and Jenny, who helped me slack pack for a few days, and Buck came out to hike part of the trail with me on my birthday, so that was pretty nice. And then like Jenny made me a cake for dinner that night too, and that was just really special to celebrate my birthday out on the trail and with them. And then I had a couple of other trail angels that helped me slack pack as I got even further south, and then to where like for the last like 3 weeks there was maybe like one night or maybe one or two nights where I maybe actually had to get a hotel where it's like I wasn't staying with a trail angel. So yeah, it was really just amazing just how so many people hear that you're coming through and they're just like, how can we help? And then and I imagine that had to been like just a relief too, because like you said, you were without your own kit for a while, and then just knowing that okay, until your new kit arrives, we got you, basically is what they were saying.
That's right. I sometimes don't even want to mention names because there's so many people. Not during the hard days of the pandemic when I was in isolation. That was just me, but that was self-imposed. But certainly, like in Michigan, I had trail angels that passed me off at the bridge, at the Mackinac Bridge, to another trail angel who drove me across the bridge, and then passed me off to another trail angel who had a package for me. And it was just, what a great experience to have.
Right on. Absolutely. All right. So now one of the questions that I always ask all my guests during the show is just some of the takeaways and life lessons that we learned from our experiences. And we kind of sort of touched on this a little bit already during our conversation so far. And again, maybe a loaded question because you've been out on that trail for so long to do the full 14,000 miles. But what have been some of your big takeaways and life lessons that you've learned out on the trail that you've been able to kind of implement into your own life moving forward, let's say off the trail, so to speak?
Oh, it's some days I feel like I really haven't learned anything. And then, but most of the time I feel like the APT, the whole thing, not just the backpacking, but the entire interpersonal, the backcountry experience, the front country experience, the hard skills and the interpersonal skills, and the running, building, growing a community and an organization. This has been the greatest education of my entire life. I think I still have student loans. I think I would have probably just taken my money and started working on this as a young man. And this would have been more than enough education. Trust me, it's been a pleasure. And I have so much gratitude, but the greatest education of my life. But what I would say is like, I don't go on these trips to find myself. maybe it finds me. It's possible, but any journey, uh, any journey, something like this of this magnitude, but even smaller journeys. It could be a weekend or an overnight. I tend to find that like some of the most rewarding journeys um, are the ones that I come back with more questions than I left with.
Hmm.
So if you're asking about lessons that I've learned, I had more questions than answers, you know. So I wasn't out there like really figuring the world out. I was just formulating more questions
Hmm.
for myself, and they can be questions, small questions like, what do I really like? Because at this, I spent so much time alone. I'm like practically a feral animal at this at this point in time. I am not socialized very well. I started this 3 years ago, and so, but what do I really like when I don't have my peers around to influence me? What do I really like when I'm not around society or feeling like I need to conform to societal norms or maybe be influenced by media? Like what are things that I like? That's an easy question, but not really. That takes time.
Right.
And then you can get into more existential stuff. Like even if you don't believe in God or you think there's a God or you're not sure one way or the other, you could get into existential things like what is God or what isn't God? If God is everything, then what isn't God? Like more questions, but
Hmm.
fewer answers. And I'm really okay with that. I'm really all right with that. And I don't think that people should really look to me to like having more answers than they do. They come from deep within. And so you go deep. And a trek like this, and a trek like you were on, uh, puts you into an environment that makes you the makes the kind of conditions that
Right.
for you to go deep, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like I think it just piques curiosity more than
Mm-hmm.
anything, just because
Mm-hmm.
again, like the amount of experiences that we have, it also kind of makes us think like, well, for me, I can speak for myself here, is that it's like what else is out there? And I
Mm-hmm.
guess just and of course at the end of it all, like, even though with how tough it was for me, at least, to finish the 1,200 miles of the Michigan section of the NCT, I kind of just thought to myself, I think this is probably it. I don't know if I'll do another through hike like this. But at the same time, though, I couldn't wrap it up and not ask myself, like, what's next? Like, what's the next adventure? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's the next cool thing that I do? Because I always try to seek out like just fun adventures. I mean, obviously, this in case across Michigan, it was a through hike, but I've done others like Peace Corps and so on and so forth, and military, of course. But
Mm-hmm.
so it's like but I still always find myself asking, well, what next? So I think if I may flip this question around to you, it's just what's next for you, and what do you see coming, on the horizon for the APT?
So I have not committed myself to any more long distance backpacking. I mean, I will be for the next month or two. I'm probably going to put in a couple more 100 miles
Mm-hmm.
before the winter and finish the APT. And um, I technically only have a couple days left, but I'll probably be out there for 500 miles or so. And uh, this was for us. I'll share this with you because I haven't shared this a lot, but this for us, and at least the way that I was conceiving of it before I started, this was phase one. I really didn't do any planning for this trek. I,
Mm-hmm.
I, I pretty much made it up as I went. I had an idea. I had many ideas. Let me put it that way. I had many ideas. I didn't have a single idea. Like there was many ideas of doing many different things as I went, and then I made my decisions sometimes on a weekly basis and sometimes on a daily basis which would drive Layla crazy because she was resupplying me. And I call her and I'm like, okay, I'm actually going to go this way now, and I need a box. And it's like Saturday, the post office is closing in like 45 minutes, and she has to like throw this box together and like run it out and try to get it out the door. So there was a lot of improv to it, but essentially, like phase one was uh, hike the route, create the route, hike the route. It was really hiking the route as I created.
Hmm.
It was happening in tandem, in in real time, and then create the nonprofit, um, create the board, the executive board, and uh, start building a community. I didn't know how to do that. I just knew that if I kept, it was one of those things where before I left, I knew I didn't have the resources or what I needed to do this trek. And there was someone in my life who was helping me out a little bit with like some website stuff. And they were like, just go, just go. And I was like, I'm not ready. They're like, just go. I'm like, I don't have enough resources. They were like, just go and it will happen if you keep going. And I just kept the wheels on the bus until reinforcements came. And reinforcements came in the face of those who are now part of the American Perimeter Trail Conference. So, but as far as what's next, like I haven't, I hope I get to backpack all around the world.
Hmm.
And, that just depends on, we'll see what the life experience is like, but uh, the APT is what is on my mind all the time. I didn't get married. I don't have children. This is really my baby, but now, I've shared it. I've made it public by creating the nonprofit. So I had to hand my baby over to the public, which I always knew I was going to do. I always knew the day was going to come when that would happen, and it did happen. And so now I've shared my dream, and it's become other people's dream. So now we have that in common, and we share that. So next also like we've created a new website, which is um, also in phases. So if you see some things on our website, that are missing, you can let us know, but more than likely they're coming. We're just in development stage.
Right.
So I had a website initially that someone made for me, and we moved on to greener pastures with just building it with a team of designers and developers. So that was all kind of phase one. Oh, also, this was something that I didn't know if I would get to before I finished or not, but I wanted to make sure that people could join as members. And so we are a membership nonprofit now. So we have members, and I haven't counted recently. I don't know if it's in 25 or 30 different states around the country. And also other countries we have members in that
Hmm.
aren't Americans, which is pretty cool. Also, like it's really fun where there's a lot of people in different states where they know the American Perimeter Trail is not coming through their state, but they are in fact members because they want to support it and be a part of it. So that always really touches me. So we move on to phase two as soon as I step into Bend, Oregon, and in a couple weeks. And what happens then is more administrative stuff. So but there is some stuff that like I have to do some more scouting. Some of my route isn't going to work. My
Mm.
Death Valley route is not going to work. I made it, but it's called Death Valley for a reason.
Right.
We can't take the American Perimeter Trail through there. I did it, but and a bunch of people have asked me for that route, and I won't give it to them because it's not on my hands. If you're experienced and you want to figure that out, my hat is off to you, but I am not going to be a part of that. It's extremely dangerous.
Hmm.
I went to Southern California this spring to re-scout that, and on foot and backpacking. And I found another route over to Arizona, but it was like just as kind of as dangerous. So New Mexico, I stayed fairly close to the border. It can't do that either. It's it's not a it's not an enjoyable experience that I want people to have. It's a lot of stress.
Hmm.
The border, there's just so much activity. Uh,
Sure. Yeah.
there's just a lot going on there that it doesn't ever really feel fully like a safe situation. Um, and that goes, that even is with Border Patrol mistaking you for someone who is illegally crossing the border. There's a lot of conflict with that too. So it's not just like being concerned about people crossing. There's there's just a lot of activity. There's a lot of weapons. There's a lot of drugs. There's just a lot of things going on. And I went too close to the border. And so I'm going to need to move that north. So there's a bunch of areas I need to go back and scout.
Hmm.
I'm going to go back through the APT. I'm not going to walk it. I'm going to walk parts of it. I'm going to hike parts of it, but I'm going to take a vehicle with me next
Right.
time. So that'll be fun. Also, the other thing is mapping. That will be fun. So you will actually be able to get the American Perimeter Trail on your mainstream apps, hopefully in 2023. So as soon as I finish, that's kind of one of the first things I'm going to complete is my mapping project, so that you'll actually be able to physically see where this is. Because right now, the only person who actually knows exactly where the route is me.
Hmm.
And we've kept it that way because it's my intellectual property. And so,
Right.
but I'm going to be happy to share that. But I want to lay it out the way that I want to lay it out. So we're in negotiations with some companies, with some app companies to roll that out so that everyone will have access to that. So that's exciting. And then we will grow the board, we'll grow the membership, and start to formalize the organization more. Uh, Grant writing. So, like I said, administrative stuff, but a lot of other like fun things as well. And we are called the American Perimeter Trail Conference, and that is a throwback to history, kind of a salute to it, if you will. The Appalachian Trail Conservancy initially was the Appalachian Trail Conference, and they actually held a conference in Washington, D.C. And the Pacific Crest Trail was initially the Pacific Crest Trail Conference, and they also held a conference. And we are the American Perimeter Trail Conference, and we look forward to holding a conference next summer. So as we formalize things, it'll be fun to have that conference and get the feedback from the membership. I call them builders instead of
Hmm.
members. I call them builders. So it'll be interesting for us to all get together. A bunch of these people I haven't met in person, even if we've talked over the phone, and I mean, I haven't met you, Josh. So it'll be great to meet some of these people in person and get some feedback for what is I have my plan going forward. That's great. I think it's great. I think it's the best plan ever. But I'm have enough humility to know that I don't know everything, and I don't know the best way
Right.
to do everything. And so this is going to take thousands of volunteers to get this thing done. And so many consultants and so many like-minded people coming together, but to share their different experiences and their different opinions. That's what it's going to take. And I know that. So, I mean, I have the humility enough to know that even if sometimes I don't like it, because I'm still like, I like my plan. But this is a we project. This is not a me project. So,
Gotcha.
mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, lots to think about, lots going on, but sounds like you got a good course laid out moving forward, and that definitely does sound fun to go out and like scout to reroute or change up some of the certain areas. So, because yeah, I mean, I haven't hiked through Death Valley myself, but I can kind of get the feeling that it wouldn't be the most pleasant time.
No, not
not
really.
not the
No.
slightest. So, okay. All right. So, what I want to ask you next is I ask all my guests to issue a challenge to our listeners because,
Okay.
we got to hear some stories from you and we shared a little bit of information today. But,
Hmm.
that I think that can only really take people so far. They have to follow it up with action, when they're done listening to these
Hmm.
podcast episodes. So,
Uh,
what I want to ask you is what challenge would you issue to our listeners today for them to go out there and live a more adventurous life?
oh wow, Josh, what a great question. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Um, this is what I do. Okay.
Hmm.
Make a list of everything that frightens you
Hmm.
and then start going toward it. Start heading in that direction. So that's it. Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
exercise.
Hmm.
Go make a list. It's not going to take you very long. It's going to take you a couple minutes. You'll know. You'll know what where the fear resides in your life.
Yeah.
You'll know where you're not daring greatly, as Brene Brown would say. It's from a Eisenhower quote, I believe, or I'm sorry, a Roosevelt quote. So you'll know where you're not daring greatly in your life, and so write those things down. And then the challenge is start moving in the direction of checking some of those off.
Hmm.
So if it's like, I would love to do what Josh did and hike through Michigan. I'd love to have that experience, but oh man, it's like, I don't know. I got this job, I got a dog. Um, I never hiked alone. I've never done an overnight. I don't know. Then maybe that's for other people. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy enough. These sorts of things. It'll start bringing up the insecurities,
Hmm.
and you'll have evidence for all of them, and you will have yourself convinced that you can't do this because, and you have yourself convinced because you've tried things like this before
Hmm.
and they didn't work out. So there's your evidence. So you've locked yourself into this box. And I'm talking to myself, really. It sounds like I'm talking to you. I'm really speaking for myself, what I do.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, I locked myself into this box. And so make the list and see if there's some things that you can check off. I bet you there's probably one on there you can check off tomorrow.
Hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised. I actually have one right now that I'm struggling with. I'm not going to like share the particulars. It doesn't have to do with backpacking. It doesn't have to do with the work I'm doing. It's just a personal thing. Honestly, okay. Well, without the details, I'm having like some social issues, like socializing issues, because
Hmm.
I've been mostly alone for the last 3 years, and so that's something that's on my list right now. That I'm like, I'm being resistant.
Hmm.
I'm seeing resistance. I'm seeing the resistance. So that's the challenge. Find the resistance. Find your fears, and then what is the resistance to accomplishing or doing any of those things, and then identify that, and then see if you can head in that direction. It might just be like, gosh, I need to have this really hard conversation with my spouse,
Hmm.
or with my child, or with my father, or it could be I have to have this really difficult conversation with my boss, or I have to leave this work.
Hmm.
But what if I don't get another job? What am I going to do? So those are pretty big, you know, and then there could be like really small things that you identify. And like I said, maybe one of those you can start moving towards tomorrow. I have every intention of moving towards mine tomorrow. We'll see how I do. We'll see how I
Okay. Right.
do.
Right on. Awesome, Rue. I like that. I appreciate that response for
Yeah,
sure.
sure.
All right. So what I have next for you in our wrap up today is my final three. These are three fun questions.
Okay,
At least I like to think that they're fun questions, but all of my
cool.
guests get asked these at the end of the show. So you're going to get asked these as well. And the first of those three questions is, what is your favorite place that you've been to so far?
Oh no. Okay. Wow. So, like the place is coupled with the experience. So we talked about that a little bit. Like
Hmm.
people go to Disney World and have a horrible day. They have a horrible time, you
Yeah.
know? And so the place itself can be inspiring, but you could just be having a crappy day. I mean, I've seen people get in fights at the Grand Canyon. So
Hmm.
so like, I've seen two people arguing, like a spouse is arguing there. So oh man, geez, I want to give you the answer that's like right here where I'm at right now, because I got to wake up that way every day, and I don't, but I move in that direction. I'm like, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. This is my favorite place that I've ever been. Um, but I'll like, oh man, I got to throw you something here. Let me throw you
All
something.
right.
Okay, I'll throw you something. Okay, just for our backpackers. All right, I've I've hiked the John Muir Trail several times. That's one of my favorite places in the High Sierra of California.
Okay. All right. John Muir
Sorry.
Trail.
Okay.
Got, gotcha. Yeah. Okay. All right. And so because like I said, sometimes I do this rapid fire, but I don't know. I kind of wanted just to see what we could come up with
Okay.
here, you know. And so the second question is, what is one thing on your bucket list that you have yet to do?
Creating the American Perimeter Trail.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it, man. That is number one. Period. Without a doubt. I don't think about other hikes, and stuff will come and go, and other travels will come, and relationships will come and go, and stuff will happen. But the American Perimeter Trail is like it's my compass.
Hmm.
It's my compass in life. It's my North Star.
Gotcha.
So yeah, creating the American Perimeter Trail.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And the last question, and this is a two-parter. What is
Okay.
your favorite animal, and have you seen
Yeah.
this animal in the wild?
Oh, that's so good. So I like I think I should probably post this. Like I was thinking the other day, not what animals have I seen, but what animals haven't I seen? Because I've it turns out I've seen most of them, like during this trip. Um, One that I think I saw, but probably didn't because it was dark, is an ocelot, and they're in like Texas, and they're a
Hmm.
cat.
Yeah.
They're a small cat. They're like the size of a house cat, but they look wild, more like a leopard.
Hmm.
Um, I thought I saw one, but I cannot confirm that. So, um, but like all the other like large mammals, definitely I saw all of those, like grizzly bears, black bears, moose, elk, uh, mountain goats, mountain sheep, so on and so forth. Uh, and my favorites are like beaver, because of their ingenuity, their intelligence, and how industrious they are. Um, the barred owl, not a barn owl, but a barred owl, because of their communication. Because someone taught me how to speak with them many years ago on a trek. He was a person who did research with owls, so he told me a little bit about their language and what they say to each other.
Huh.
And so when like often, if I'm living in a place that has barred owls that are residential there, I talk with them often. And then on my hikes, depending on what region I'm in the country, it's not uncommon to hear barred owls. So they're the ones who say, "Who cooks for you?
Mm.
Who cooks for you?" And then I always say, like in the north, they say, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you?" And then in the south, the southern barred owl, they say, "Who cooks for y'all? Who cooks for y'all?" But and then the wolverine, but I don't have like a strong connection to this animal. But it's just one of my favorites because I saw one where they've been extinct for like 150 years, and that was in Northern California. I
Hmm.
saw one. My hiking partner saw one. I said, "That's a wolverine." It was just standing. We were at camp. It was just standing there, staring right back at us. And I'm like, "That's a wolverine." And she's like, "They've been extinct here for 150 years." And I was like, "Yeah, but that's a wolverine." She's like, "No, it can't be." So then it ran off. And we had this conversation. She's like, no, listen, it was a badger. There hasn't been a wolverine seen here for over 100 years. They don't exist here anymore. They did once upon a time, but they're not here anymore. And I was like, yeah, but I know what I saw. And she's like, I know we both saw it, but we have to use reason here. Reason, be rational. They don't exist here. You didn't see it here. And like a year later, I'm listening to National Public Radio, and someone in the exact spot that we were at who was doing research on pine martens in the Northern Sierra caught a wolverine, maybe the one I saw on their game camera. And I was like, they were there when the report came on the radio. And I was like, yes, I told you so. So just for that reason. Yeah. For that reason.
Gotcha. And those are all first to come up on the podcast as well, Rue. So
nice.
Beavers are cool and they're cute, but I wouldn't say I developed like a total disdain, but there were a couple of moments on the trail where their dams did flood like parts of the trail, and I would have to find a way around them. I mean, it wasn't like the end of the world or anything, but I'm just like, you little buggers. It's just like you had to build your dam right here, didn't you?
No, there's definitely a love-hate relationship with that. There have been times where I've needed to cross streams or rivers, and I used their dam so I didn't have to swim. And I was like so grateful that they built that. But then there's other times, like you said, where something was like all flooded out and washed out because of the beaver activity, or also like, they call Giardia, the parasite, beaver fever.
Yeah.
So like definitely like I get to a fresh water source and I'm like, yes. And then I see the beaver and I go, shoot, they're pooping in here.
But for sure. And and as far as like Wolverines is concerned, well, actually, believe it or not, that's my trail name is Wolverine, because I got my start in the Wolverine State as a long distance hiker. So but yeah, it's just, I mean, I think the last time I've seen one, I don't think I've seen one in the wild yet, but you've seen them in like zoos and stuff, but let's just face it, it's not the same as seeing them in the wild, like at all, like how you did. So hopefully.
And I see like the Wolverine project and stuff you're working on, and so I definitely threw that one in there because it was special, very memorable thing that I will never forget. Getting to see an animal that's not supposed to be there,
right?
And also I knew the connection to you, so I'm glad we got to share that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Right on, man. So. All right. Well, Rue, that's it. That's all the questions I have for you. But before we call it a day here, let's just go over where our listeners can go to connect with you. I know you're on social media, and you said that you're making strides to keep your website continuing to develop. So yeah, where can they find you on social media, and also where can they learn more about the American Perimeter Trail?
Great. So social media, you can just go to Facebook or Instagram, and what you're going to do is you're going to look for Rue McKenrick. Or you're going to look for the American Perimeter Trail, and either one. And that will get you to different pages. So there's an American Perimeter Trail Facebook page, but there's also a community APT Facebook page. And there you can post. Because on the other one, it's our page. And then we put up like the fundraisers and like the work that we're doing. But the other one is for the community to interact with each other. So check that one out. And then it's same on Instagram. You can either look me up or look up the American Perimeter Trail. And there's a website that I do not really use, which is Rue McKenrick .weebly.com. And there, if you want to, you can contribute to me finishing the APT, but just know that money goes to like supplies and me just finishing this last piece. It goes directly to me. It is not part of the organization. But if you want to go to the organization, then you go to AmericanPerimeterTrail.org, and there you'll be able to find out a lot more about the trail, a lot more than what I talked about today, and see some maps and different things like that and descriptions. And there, you can also contribute, and that's tax deductible because that is a 501c3 nonprofit. And you can also check out our store for American Perimeter Trail merchandise. And all of that goes to conservation and back into the organization, all the proceeds from that. I don't see any of that. And the other thing that I wanted to mention was we do have a fundraiser going on. Just go look at the stuff. It's all listed there. We're also working on a documentary and fundraising for that. So there's information there to find out more about the APT documentary and membership. If you would like to become a member, it's $35 annually. And the benefits are listed there that you get. We give you something for that. You get some benefits with that. And if you don't have $35, that's fine. I've been in places where I don't have $35, so I understand. You can pay $6 every other month for a year and then pay for your membership that way. And that's a way that we were trying to make sure, if you're low on cash, that you could still participate. So
okay.
I'll see you there.
All right. And I'll also get all those linked up in the show notes for this episode as well. So our listeners can go and find them there laid out for them. So yeah. And all right. Well, Rue, I appreciate you jumping on the call today. I mean, I know we had to deal a little bit with the time change difference with you being on Pacific time and me being in Central time, but I'm glad we were really able to work this out. So yeah, just thanks for being here and sharing your stories and your insights with myself and the listeners today. This has been great.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, Josh.
All right. Right on.